Boy, I tell you what, if I could just live up to that intro, we will be we will be doing good. Well, welcome everybody to the first episode of the Chris Akers Show, powered by Southern Blend Radio. And I have enough lights around me right now that if this fails, the good thing that's going to come from this is I will have a summer tan. I have got lights behind me, over top of me, in front of me, to the sides. So I feel like a McNugget, but that's okay. We're going to have a good time. This May, believe it or not, Southern Blend Radio will celebrate 6 years of broadcasting. And I'll be honest with you, when we first, Andrea and I, my wife Andrea, when we first started Southern Blend, it was for a need. Um, our hometown, our home area of Charleston, West Virginia, does not have a full-time Southern gospel music station. That is another topic for another day, but it was just amazing that was allowed to happen. So we thought, what can we do to help out? And we came up with this internet radio station called Southern Blend. Initially, it was just we're just trying to do local things with it, help our neighbors here with some great Southern gospel music. But then a funny thing happened. It started spreading, and before long, we had listeners all over the United States and into Canada. And we are coming off, if you pay attention to statistics, we are coming off the biggest 2 months ever in our history in January and February. So we give all the glory to God for that. It's just a blessing to us to be able to do it. And we have made so many friends over the years with the artists, getting to know them. And so I thought, what could we do? I enjoy that, the fellowship, getting to know the artists. So Chris Akers Show was kind of formed to do just that, get artists away from the platform and away from the product table and off the bus, and just have a fun conversation. So that's what we're going to do here. Where it goes, who knows? But it's going to be a one heck of a ride. Hey, listen, if you are new to Southern Blend Radio, I want to let you know how you can listen to us. First of all, you can go to southernblendradio.com. There's a link, listen now, and we play the absolute best in Southern gospel music. We say it's the best music this side of Beulah Land, and I know a lot of people who would agree with that. Not just Southern Blend music, but Southern gospel. And so also, if you have a smartphone, you can go to the App Store and download the Live 365 app. We broadcast 24/7. We have today's top 80 songs. We have hits from yesterday. You can tune in at any time and hear the Hensons or the Hovey Lister and the Statesman, JD and the Stamps, the Goodmans. I mean, it's hard to say who you will hear on Southern Blend Radio. And we also feature the hymns from the church. So there's something for everybody. So give us a listen to southernblendradio.com or download that free Live 365 app. Then just search for Southern Blend Radio and take us wherever you go. I have Apple CarPlay, I believe is what it's called. And I listen, of course, I'm biased, of course, but I listen to Southern Blend Radio on the way to work, on the way home. And it's just a great tool. And that's through the Live 365 app. So give us a try if you haven't already. And I think you'll enjoy what you hear. I hope so. Let us know if you do. If you don't, just keep your mouth shut. That's the thing to do. But no, let us know if there's something you want to hear that we're not playing. We'll absolutely get that on for you. A matter of fact, true story, we had a call just the other day from a lady in Louisiana. She requested a song and said, "Can you play it?" And I said, "I guarantee," and we did. And hopefully she's a permanent listener now. So give us a try, southernblendradio.com. One other thing that we are excited to be a part of is with the Southern Gospel Music Association of West Virginia, third annual Hall of Fame induction ceremony and concert. That is coming up April the 27th at Christ Temple Church in Huntington, West Virginia. This will be our third class, and we have got a doozy of a class that we're going to be inducting that evening. Um, Mark Hale will be inducted that evening. The great Harold Lane and Homer Fry, the Gospel Harmony Boys. Diana Perry Gillette, you will remember her from the Perry Sisters, and Gail Tank Tackett. Tank has sang with Who's Who in Southern gospel music. So that evening is going to be a very, very special evening. We're also going to be honoring a super fan, the Eric Lusk Memorial Super Fan, and that is the Professor Dean Adkins. Dean Adkins knows more about Southern gospel music than he's probably forgotten more than I will ever know. So that is going to be a great time to honor him. Also, we will be honoring Pastor Chuck Lawrence at Christ Temple Church with our Legacy Award for all of his many decades of service to the Lord through song. And Tribute Quartet and the Perrys will be with us that evening. Going to be a great time. So please, please make your plans now to join us. April the 27th, 6 o'clock, Christ Temple Church in Huntington. No admission charge. Just come on out and let's just have a good time in the Lord, okay? Now, speaking of the SGMA of West Virginia Hall of Fame, my first guest ever on the Chris Akers Show. Hopefully it won't be my last guest ever on the Chris Akers Show. No pressure. I mean, there's no bar here. But is the great Clacy Williams of the Gospel Harmony Boys. He was inducted in the very first class of the SGMA of West Virginia Hall of Fame. And it is my honor. Let me bring Brother Clacy in. Hello, Clacy Williams.
How are you, brother?
I am well. How are you?
I'm doing very well for an old codger.
Well, you know what? I have said to your face, and I've also said it behind your back, full disclosure, that one of my favorite gospel songs is one that you wrote, and that is Grandma's Graduation Day.
Oh, well,
And
thank you so much.
I love how you present that song during your program, because it tells a lot about your background, where you're from, and everything. So I think that'd be a great place to start tonight. Tell us about Grandma's Graduation Day and how that came to be.
Well, Chris, I grew up in a little town called Flat Top, West Virginia.
Yeah.
It's a suburb of Gent.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Twin
right there.
Cities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Cool Ridge was a suburb of Gent too. That's
Yeah.
where Ernie Phillips was from.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ernie and I lived about 6 miles apart when we were kids. But grew up in that little town. It's a small town. There were maybe 300 people or so back in those days, and everybody was kinfolks. All uncles and aunts and cousins and
Right.
grandpas, and it was just a typical family residence
Sure.
in the area. And but that very one special lady, she was my Sunday school teacher, and she also was a lady who in my life, she set a lot of values that this little boy
Right.
lived with for the past 75 years. I've just, it's been a joy to have grown up with her. And I can remember, back in those years, she used to do a lot of canning and that kind of thing at home. And she had this great big old copper pot. And she'd build a big fire up around that thing. We'd peel apples for days. To put those apples in that big old copper kettle, and boy, she'd light that fire, put in a bunch of cinnamon, and I
Ooh.
think it must have been a truckload of sugar. And boy, she'd end up with the best, absolutely the best apple butter you ever put on a cat head biscuit came out of that old
Mm.
copper pot of my grandma's. She finally passed away. I wasn't but about 12, 13 years old when she passed away. And boy, it left a real vacancy in my heart, in my life when she
Sure.
left us. It sure did. But I knew she was going on to a greater place than she'd ever been at Flat Top for sure. And I remember we took her down to that little Baptist church there at Flat Top, and the preacher broke open the Bible. He preached one of those hellfire evangelical
Oh
sermons.
yeah,
You know what I'm talking about.
I
It,
do.
we, he read the obituary, but that was a very small part of this
Yeah.
particular service. And there were people whose hearts were tender from the loss, and folks made decisions for the Lord in that funeral service that day.
Yeah.
One of them was my dad, and it's such a great memory in
Yeah.
my life that
Yeah.
and so 1988. I'm behind the wheel of a bus. Everybody else is in bed. We're headed toward Michigan, and everybody's in bed. And it just seemed like as I'm sitting there driving, the Lord just started giving me this song, and boy, it as it just came to life to me while I was driving along there at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning,
Right.
and I managed to reach around and grab a piece of paper and a pencil and jotted down some notes so I could remember what I was thinking, and the song ended up being the result of it.
Well, it's a great song, and we play that on Southern Blend Radio, and we still get requests for that. So
Good, good.
it's still on there, and it's just a great song, and I appreciate every time that I am in service with you all. You always sing that, and I appreciate that. That's
Well, Chris, it's probably we probably haven't missed a, a program in the last 15 years that we've not sung that song,
yeah,
and it's not because we love it so much. It's because people ask for it, and
right.
it's just
Well, it's
one
a
of
great
those
song.
tunes.
Yeah, it's a
Whenever we
great
go
song.
somewhere, I guess people relate to it.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
If
I think it was a law for a grandmother to can, and
yeah,
I think it was
yeah.
unwritten law. I mean, mine did. And you were talking about where you were from. My dad grew up in the big metropolis of Coal City.
Oh well, I
Uh,
see. That's over close to where my wife is from.
yeah, which is
She
near the metropolis of Sophie.
yeah,
Uh, and see
exactly.
it, and you're with me. That is Sophie and
It
not
is.
Sophia.
It is in southern West Virginia.
Yes, yes, that's right. That's right.
You
So
see, now my wife grew up in the metropolis there of Sophie. See,
yeah,
she went to Stokoe or to Sophie High School.
yeah. Dad
Yeah.
went to Stokoe. You said Stokoe.
Well, see, I my first job was at Stokoe.
Really?
Yeah,
Yeah.
after I got out of college, I was at Stokoe Junior High School.
Dad originally lived where Independence High School is now.
Yeah.
Out in he has shown me a rock that he's played on out there by the school. I mean, it's just you know, I'm telling you, it's
Well, I'm sure all of your listeners and viewers know exactly where Flat Top is, and so
well,
consequently, they know where that ski slope is. And when I was a kid, I used to go sleigh riding on that mountain where the ski slope is at today.
yeah. Well, they do
So
now. So
yeah, yeah. Well, the sleigh riding is no longer a deal there. That's they've advanced beyond that point.
and let me say this for everybody watching this. If I look at you, I'm still getting used to this, obviously. So if I look at you, it appears as I'm looking down and not paying attention to you. And it's not, I'm actually, if, like right now, I'm looking at you, and that probably
Yeah.
looks like I'm looking at something else. But I'm actually looking at you on screen. But if
Well,
I go up and look at the camera, then I can't see your expression. So,
I got
folks,
the
just
same.
bear with
I got the same problem over here. If you're lower than
me. Yeah.
you're lower than I am on the camera, so consequently, it's
Yeah.
I have to look down to see what you're doing.
Right.
So,
Right. So, hey, everybody just go along with it. We're doing the best we can.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It's not that we're trying not to look at the folks who are out there listening to
That's
us.
right. That's right. That's right. So I'll look up occasionally and smile, and but I want to look at you while we're talking. This question: there are a lot of these programs, these type of shows now. I've noticed artist interviews, which I think is great. There's some that are geared towards the younger audiences, which I think is wonderful. Let's get the youth involved in Southern gospel. We've talked about that before.
Yes.
Um, but the one question that is asked everywhere and every time, and I guess I'll just follow the leader and do it
Why
again,
not?
is who was your musical influences growing up?
Well, probably the greatest musical influence I had was a wonderful guy who also happened to have married my first cousin. So he was family. He directed the music in the little church that I grew up in. And one afternoon on a sunny Sunday afternoon, a bunch of us guys were out at the elementary school playing baseball, and he drove up the where you could drive right behind the backstop on this baseball field. He drove
Mhm.
up behind the backstop and said, "I understand my nickname when I was a little boy was Dumpy." And he said,
Really?
"Yes, it was. My dad called me his little dumpling when I was born, and it just kind of
Oh,
stuck."
I'm
But
writing that down.
yeah, you'll make a note of that, won't you?
Yeah, I will.
So he pulled up behind the backstop and hollered, "Hey, Dumpy, let's go practice singing." So I jumped the fence and went and got in his car and went home with him. Me and three cousins had a little rehearsal and had put together a quartet for our local church, and I haven't stopped since. That's and of course he was a big Weatherford's fan, so I
Oh, yeah.
got to listen. I listened to a lot of Weatherford stuff growing up.
Smooth.
Oh my goodness, and the harmonies were amazing, and
Yeah.
Earl Weatherford was not the best singer in the world, but he was one of the best baritones that ever
Hmm.
sang.
He put
And
it in the pocket, as they said,
he
right?
could
Laid it
fill
right
the
in there.
hole up. I mean, tell you,
Yeah,
he
yeah,
filled it up.
yeah.
And I don't know who did all the arranging back in those days, but they had some great people go through there, like Armin Morales and Glenn Payne sang with the Weatherfords at one time. In fact, he was there when I got introduced to them.
Yeah.
So between Virgil French, who was my choir director, and an old guy in our choir by the name of Gilmer Sweeney that kind of taught me how to sing
Right.
in the choir. Now those were probably the two greatest influences growing up. Then of course I became a real fan of the Weatherfords and the Statesmen and the
Hmm.
Blackwoods, and you know I ran the gamut after I got introduced.
Right.
Started a
Well,
collection. I got serious about collecting records.
well, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't you tell me that at one point you sang with, for a little while with Hopper Brothers and Connie?
I did back in the late 1960s. Was a short stint.
Yeah.
It was long enough for me to realize that that gospel music did a little different than I thought it was,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
but I enjoyed my stint there and learned a lot. A lot about the actual business and
Right. Right.
what was going on in gospel music.
How, you're synonymous now with Gospel Harmony Boys. You can't think of one without the other. I mean, you say Gospel Harmony Boys, and the first thing that comes to my mind, and I know I'm not alone, is Clacy Williams.
Well, you
Um,
see, when I think of Gospel Harmony Boys, the first thing that comes to my mind is Harold Lane and Home Fry.
yeah, see, and that is with this Hall of Fame. I understand that. Uh,
Yeah,
Let me say this: the SGMA of West Virginia Hall of Fame is. I'm a big history guy. I love American history, especially.
yeah.
If there's a war, I'd love to study it and talk about it. There's nothing that's quite as good as some kind of war or controversy. uh, I'm not talking about today, but I love history because I don't think we can know where we're going until we understand fully where we've been.
Well,
Uh,
sometimes we forget to look at that, don't we?
we do, and I think
Yeah.
that's true also in Southern gospel music. So I have. This has just been wonderful. It's been a godsend for me, the SGMA of West Virginia, this Hall of Fame, because I've learned so much. We're getting ready to induct, as I said earlier, Homer Fry as one of this year's inductees, and
Hmm.
I did not know that he was in a very, 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 very early uh, edition, I guess, or creation, or however you want to say it, of the Dixie Melody Boys.
Yeah, he was.
I did not know that, and I did not know
Well,
Oklahoma was Tulsa. I believe there was Dixie Melody Boys in Tulsa, out in
now
that area.
I don't know that. I'm not familiar with that, but
Yeah.
I know the Dixie Melody Boys actually started in Huntington, West
Yes.
Virginia,
Yes.
and the gentleman who started it finally ended up moving to North Carolina, and
Hmm.
so he took the name with him, and that's where the Dixie Melody Boys everybody knows actually
Right. Right.
originated, and that's how they
Yeah.
started.
I mean, a lot of people don't realize there was Dixie Melody Boys before Ed O'Neill. I mean,
Yeah, and then Ed came along and kind of became the like you were saying a moment ago. You can't think of Dixie Melody Boys without thinking about Ed
right.
O'Neill. I mean,
Exactly.
that's just
Exactly.
automatic. Yeah.
So, how did you get involved? How did you get to know the Gospel Harmony Boys? How did
We
your tenure start?
Well, I'm gonna tell you, Chris, that was a God thing. It really was. Um, I was I was just at home one afternoon, and a buddy of mine came by and said, "I just heard that the Cathedral Quartet's looking for a tenor singer. You think you'd be interested?" I said, "Well, I don't know whether I would be or not. I was teaching school at the time, and he said, well, you ought to call and talk to them." So I got busy and looked up a phone number and found Glenn Payne's phone. And I just had an absolutely terrific conversation with Glenn Payne. He didn't know me from Adam, had no idea who I was or whether I could sing a note. Um, but he talked to me in a very, very wonderful kind of way as a guy who was a total stranger.
Mm-hmm.
And he told me, he said, I wish you had called me last week. We just hired Roger Horn, who sang with the Gospel Harmony Boys. So I would suggest you call Homer Fry, because I know they're looking.
Wow.
Now, after hanging up with him, I called Homer.
Yeah.
As it happened, the Harmony Boys had just lost two tenor singers. Uh, Roger had gone with the Cathedrals,
Yeah.
but the guy who was playing bass guitar for them at the time, who was Gail Tank Tackett,
Back it. Yeah.
was playing bass guitar for them. And Gail, or Tank as we all call him,
Yeah.
Tank went with the Weatherfords.
Yes.
He left the Harmony Boys 2 weeks before Roger did, so they lost two tenor singers within 2 weeks of one another. And so I went down. I happened to be by the time they called me to audition, I had gone to school up at Morgantown, and so I was working on a master's degree up there. And they called and said, "Hey, can you come down Thursday night and audition?" I thought, Morgantown to Chesapeake, Ohio for an audition.
Whew.
Okay. So I packed it up early afternoon and took off to Huntington area, and ended up going through the audition, which was a really interesting experience because they just threw a bunch of handwritten arrangements up on a piano and
Yeah.
expected me to sing them. Um, and I don't have the foggiest idea why God got me through that, but He did. And so that was in June sometime, and I got a phone call the weekend of the 4th of July, and was Homer Fry, and Homer said, "We're going to Silver Hills, Maryland. We're going to drive right through Morgantown. We'll pick you up on the way through." And I went to Silver Hills, Maryland, and sang a program with them uh, without ever having a real rehearsal,
Wow.
and just happened to have the Statesmen, the Blackwood Brothers, the Stamps, the Spears on the program with us
No
that night.
pressure. No pressure.
No, no, no pressure whatsoever. But it was that was really my beginning.
Wow. That's, I mean, just in the few minutes we've been talking, look at the connections here. You started out talking about the Weatherfords, and we were talking about Tank Tackett being in the Hall of Fame and how that all just, I mean, it's unbelievable. It's
Well,
unbelievable.
the gospel music community is not a very big community. Reality, when you look at the number of people who are actually involved in gospel music, there's not a lot of them.
Right.
So consequently, you get acquainted, you develop a lot of friendships, and you become acquainted with all the folks who are associated in some ways or another. Some more so than others. It's like any other thing. You find people that you really like, and then you find people that you get along with. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah. Right.
And so you develop some serious friendships, and others are just acquaintances. But in one way or another, you get to know people.
Sure.
Yeah.
How, how often, what was the typical, when you first started with the Harmony Boys,
hmm
what was the typical singing week like for you all? I mean, did you go out on this?
We usually would leave on a Friday and come back on late Sunday night, Monday morning. There were lots of times when I got off a bus, I drove to Beckley, where I lived at that time.
Yeah.
Drove to Beckley, which is a 2.5 hour drive back in those days, and get home in time, take a shower, and dress and go to school,
Right.
go to
And it
work.
wasn't, we weren't just talking about you were going to sing over across the river in Ohio. I mean, there were some miles.
There were lots of Friday nights or Sunday nights that we would end up in Flint, Michigan, or
Yeah.
Detroit, or Fort Wayne, Indiana, or it was not unusual to have that happen. And the guys were always good to me. They knew I had to be in the morning, so they
Yeah.
usually on Sunday nights I would drive a first shift out, or sometimes they'd just put me to bed, so
Yeah.
I'd sleep all the way home. So it was it was a bearable, livable situation
Sure.
circumstance. In fact, I learned to sleep better on the bus than I did at home.
Yeah.
Um, so it worked out fine.
Where is the most unusual place that you have ever sang or performed as part of the Harmony Boys?
Well, that's a good question. That is a really good question. Um, Probably the Taylor County Fair, which is up in central part of West Virginia,
Mm-hmm.
north central. We They had an outside stage, and it just poured the rain. I mean, it was raining cats and dogs. So they moved it to an indoor shed that they had. But what they had just before we got up to sing is they had an elephant show
Oh boy.
at this particular instance, and it was a really interesting day, working around everything that we had to work around
Yeah.
to be able to do that.
They
We had to go to an awful lot of efforts to clean microphone cords after that
I was
show.
going to say the elephants left their mark, right?
Yes, they did.
Yeah. It's just amazing. I had the privilege of working with Robert Fulton
Hmm.
back in my other radio days.
What a
Robert
great
was
guy.
the tenor
I
singer
like
for
I
Gold
like
City.
Robert.
Yeah, and
Yep.
he's pastor now over in Madison. But he told me at Gold City, and I hope Robert you're watching now. But anyway, he told me about they had a guy open up for them for Gold City, and he all he did was whistle, and his
Well,
whole
how cool.
program was whistling. Now you talk about some lungs. Um, God bless him.
Well, it's hard to deliver a message with a whistle, unless,
Yeah,
of course, you're doing songs that people know and are singing along in their head with while
uh,
you're whistling.
I guess. I guess. I don't know if the Andy Griffith theme was a him or not in his mind, but anyway, it
I
just
don't
was.
know. I know the song, but I have no idea what the song was about.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know either. It just seemed
No.
like it fit. I don't know. How many guesstimates? I know, and you may know this off the top of your head. How many recordings have you been a part of?
um, well, with the Harmony Boys themselves, I think about 34, 35. Um, Stuff that I've done, help produce, or some of those others
Sure,
would probably round that up close to 50 or so. If
sure.
where I haven't actually been singing, but doing something in the background.
Out of all these years, this is you'll probably fuss at me for this question, but out of all out of all these years, if you could pick your favorite Harmony Boys song, whether you were a part
Oh
of it
my,
or not, what do you
my, my,
think that
my.
would be?
That's tough. Not tough because it's tough because there are so many of them.
Yes,
The, you know, the guys historically, I mean, they've done some absolutely wonderful material back over the years, and it's hard to just nail one down.
yeah,
Um, but I would say some of the most popular things we've ever sung was a song back in the '70s called "10,000 Years" that Gordon Jensen wrote.
hmm
"The King is Coming," which was a Bill Gaither tune. Um, I sang "One Day at a Time" until I was sick of it. I
really.
could I could almost get ill just by listening to the intro of that song.
Okay, that duly noted.
I mean, we literally wore that thing out for years. I don't know how
Really?
long we sung it, but oh my heavens, it was kind of like Grandma's graduation day. Everywhere you went, somebody wanted to hear one day at a
Yeah,
time. So
yeah.
over and over and over and over, we sang that song. Um, but I don't know. I guess truthfully, if I had to name my favorite song that we've ever done, I'd have to be current. Um, the song that we've got out right now that you've been playing on radio is truly one of my very favorite songs that we have ever done, and it's called "I Talked to Someone About You Today," and it's about prayer, and interestingly enough, you don't really get that message until the very end of the song when it actually reveals who
Yeah.
who you're talking to. But the song is just it just comes home to me. It's about my mama. My mama used to sit up at night and pray for me when I was out doing things I shouldn't have been doing and places I shouldn't have been going.
Right.
And I'd come home and she'd be in the old living room, and I knew that she'd been sitting there praying the whole time I was gone, after Dad had long since gone to bed. And so as I look back at my own life, that song means so much to me because in reality, that's what happened for me. My mom loved me enough that she was willing to sacrifice a night's rest to pray for me that I would get home safely.
You know what's funny about that is I've jotted down some questions. Of course, we talk and
Of
we know
course.
each other that I don't need notes to talk to you. This again, this is what I love, which I hope this program becomes and continues to be is just we're just talking like friends,
Yeah,
and I think
exactly.
that's just conversational. I don't want it to be rehearsed, but I had some notes about that song, and it's funny. My dad uh, saw he came to something SGMA did, and you all the Harmony Boys were there, and he got that CD, and before it was ever released as a single, he told me one day, he said, "Hey, let me play you. Let me tell you what my favorite song on that project is," and it was that I talked to someone about you today. And I mean, it has. We get requests, and that song made it up into I believe, the top 5 on Southern Blend, and it's done that across the country. I mean, we see
Yeah,
charts, and
yeah.
and I know you all aren't about charts, but
Well, the interesting thing about that, and you talk, we'll talk just a little bit about the whole charting situation. And
yeah,
there have been quartets spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars on what we call radio promotion,
yeah,
where they hire somebody to call the stations and talk to them and to try to promote, have them play that particular
mhm,
song that they've got out there. That song has gone as high as 2 and 3
yeah,
on several stations across the
right,
country.
mhm,
We've not spent one nickel on radio promotion. God has God has done what He has done to use that song the way that it's been used, and I just pray that God uses it to touch people and to bring home the thought that we need to love people, and from my perception, praying for somebody is synonymous with loving them.
mhm,
You have to have that. Those two things go together from my perception. If you love them, then you are lifting them up, and
right,
if you're lifting them up, chances are you love them.
yeah.
Yeah.
And the thing about it is you don't have to post on a Facebook page and let them know you're doing it. That
No,
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 you don't have to
no.
do
That's
that.
that's a personal thing.
That's right. That's right.
It's a personal thing. It's like your relationship with the Lord. You know, um, God, the relationship. Grandma and Grandpa were great Christians, but that doesn't save me. It's a relationship thing, and
Right.
your relationship with God is what makes that difference.
That's where how did you come across that song?
You know, interesting you to ask that question. There was a there was a group several years ago called Mincer White and Cheney, tremendous trio. Those guys could flat sing. I
Mhm.
loved listening to them, and so I picked up a copy of a CD. I happened to happened to go to hear them one night, and I picked up the CD and I brought it home. That song was on the CD, and I'm not sure why. I don't think they ever released that song. I don't, not to my knowledge. Um, um, Minter of the group wrote the song. It's an original song
Hmm.
from he wrote the tune, and back then that was the song on that CD that I just kept playing over and over and over. I'd stick it in my car, and that's the song that I kept going back and listening to again.
Yeah.
And I quite honestly forgot about it. It was one of those CDs that after you've worn it out,
Right.
practically you it goes in the shelf, with all the rest of them. And so I hadn't listened to it in ages. And we got ready to do this latest recording, and I just started going through some old stuff. I've got thousands of albums and few hundred CDs, and so I started just thinking, well, there ought to be something here
Yeah.
that might be something we'd want to try to include in our
Hmm.
recording. For some reason, the Lord led me to that CD, and and when I looked at the shelf, that thing jumped off the shelf at me. I mean, it was like, here I am,
Yeah, that's right.
and and um, and I pulled that CD down and went straight to the song. I knew where I was going, and so
Well,
I stuck it on the list. Well, the way we select songs is we put songs on the list, and then everybody sits and listens to them and decides, yeah, we do, or nah, that doesn't fit us. And quite honestly, um, the guys were not real excited about that song when they heard it. Um, the thought was, oh, it sounds like somebody's gossiping about someone. And that's not necessarily what we want to do, because prayer was not mentioned. It's not mentioned in the song. Just says, I talked to someone about you today.
yeah.
I told him what you're going through, and it. You don't realize that it's prayer until you get to the end of the song, or you
Yeah.
listen to me introduce it.
Yeah. Well,
You know what
you're
you're
right.
gonna.
It all comes around there at the end.
Yeah, yeah.
Just I love how it starts. It's just a unique. It's just a great sound. It's just I feel sometimes in Southern gospel music, we get a lot of songs that Southern blend, and some make the air, some don't. Quite honestly,
Sure.
and it doesn't matter to me what the label says. I mean, you know, there's some amazing independent songs that are just
Well, there are some amazing independent artists
absolutely
and
so.
then there are people like us who've been on labels and just decided that wasn't what we wanted to do anymore.
Well, it's just a good song. That's a good project. And I asked you once because I'm just fascinated by how things work. My mind probably works a little bit different than some, but I always think, well, I wonder why that is. I asked you one time. I said, how do you come up with the order of the songs on a
Uh,
project?
on a CD.
Yeah, yeah,
Well, I try to look at them from several perspectives, and usually I get stuck with making that decision.
yeah.
Um, I look at them from the perspective of what is the message in the song, and I look at it from what key are they done in, what, because you don't want to put two songs that are in the same key back to back.
Hmm.
You want that break.
Right.
I look at who is featured on the song, which one of the boys is singing the featured line, and I try to separate that a little bit. And then you try to pick out, well, what is the song that you want to lead this CD off with? What song is it that's going to set the mood for the rest of this music that's going
Right.
on the package?
Hmm.
Um, and then what song are you going to end it with? And normally, I quite honestly, I usually try to end with what I call a power ballad. It's usually a heavy message song, and something that usually is orchestrated. We get the big band back behind us, and it usually is
Right.
a song that builds at
Hmm.
the end. Like on this album, it's that um, the name of the tune just slipped my mind, but it's one of those kind of tunes.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's kind of fun to do, actually, to sit down and try to
Yeah.
arrange that in such a way that people will not listen to two songs and say, well, I've heard that they're all going to be just alike. So
I've told you, and I've told a lot of people this. You all, if anybody wants to know how to uh, do a program, lay a program out, they ought to come watch the Gospel Harmony Boys. That is you do an unbelievable job. The program just flows. I
I
mean,
appreciate that, Chris.
it's great. I mean, it's such balance. Sometimes you go and you're like, wow, I've got to breathe here for a second. I'm just, you're just, um, it's just great. It's just great balance. I've
I
told a
appreciate
million.
that a lot. That ends up being my responsibility to do as well. But it's one of those things you just, when you get ready to start writing a program, you start looking at where you're going, and sometimes the audience makes a difference.
Yeah,
Um, if sometimes we sang in an apostolic church a few weeks ago, and so we ended up having to change a few things, a few songs, and dropped a couple out of the program and let others in. And I mean,
right.
you don't go into a Seventh Day Advent church and sing "Every Day Will Be Sunday" by and by.
Yeah,
Um,
well,
it's
yeah,
you
yeah,
just be selective and smart enough to
right.
to
Have to
respect
know who
the.
you're singing to.
Yeah, you
Right,
respect your host.
right,
You
right.
just you respect their host and what they believe and what they're trying to do.
Do you always believe you start a program off with a fast song? I mean, is that
Not always. We don't always do that. For many years, we started we started a program off with um, "I Will Serve Thee," which is the farthest thing as you can think of from a fast song.
yeah, yeah,
Um, but it sets a mood for a worship service. Um, it's it gets the audience into the right mood for worship. And so it depends on where you are and what you're doing. Most programs we start off with an up tempo or a medium tempo song, and I try to usually start something that everybody gets a little bit of,
hmm,
sort of introduce all the voices.
right,
Maybe a song that has a lead line for two or three of the guys that are
right,
that are,
right.
that are in the group. Yeah.
So, how many years have the Gospel Harmony Boys been at it, and how many years has Clacy Williams been a part of the Harmony Boys?
Well, the Harmony Boys started in 1952, and if I remember correctly, they were going to call themselves the the something Harmoniers, and I don't remember. There was another piece of that, and they got to the church. This was the very first program they ever did. They
Mhm.
got to the church, and they were singing with a group that had exactly the same name.
Oh wow!
So on the fly, uh, Harold Lane changed the name of the group to Gospel Harmony Boys.
Yeah, I would say that other group sang first. The name.
I don't know what the order was, but
Well, that was a
I
good break, though. Really, I mean, Gospel
understand.
Harmony Boys is a name that is just
Well, it's been
synonymous with
it's been around for 72 years. It will be
72 years.
72. It started in 1952, um, and so consequently, we're in our 72nd year as an organization, as a ministry, and it's changed personnel a lot. And the original guys are all passed, so they're singing together again.
Yeah, oh yeah.
But um, over the years, if I remember correctly, we've had 38 people who have been singers, performers, not necessarily
Mhm.
singers. It might have been a guitar player or something of that nature. Piano players. We seems to me like we've had more piano players than we have anything else. But over the years, that those people come and go,
Right.
and it's amazing how God continues to put talented people into this organization. When I look back at the people that I've had an opportunity to sing with, I'm just absolutely blown away. It's been amazing, the people, the talent that's been through this group. We've had a lot of people who've left here and gone on into full time business as well. It's been
how many
cool.
years has it been for you totaling in
I
Southern
started
California?
19. I started 1971, so that's been what 13 years ago.
Yeah,
It will
14.
be It'll be 13 years July the 4th.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's what amazes me is in QC this past year we Andrew and I came and spent a lot of time at the Harmony Boys. Let me tell you something. That's the place to be. The Gospel Harmony Boys booth at NQC because I was lucky enough to jump into some pictures. Hey, what a great selfie opportunity! Um, but stories, I mean, and how respected you are. That's huge. You can't minimize that at all, Clacy. How people love you down there at NQC, your
Well, I
peers.
appreciate that. I've had the opportunity and the privilege of actually the delight of making a lot of wonderful friends in the music business, and it's just been a joy to have the opportunity to do it. When I look back at when I look back at that last 52 years, and I think about where I've been and what I've done and the opportunities that God has provided, all of that has been just very enriching to my life. But nothing is more enriching than to go to a church somewhere and sing a program like we did the last time we were out. We sang at a Church of God on a Sunday morning. I got a text at about 9 o'clock Sunday night from the pastor of that church, and the pastor texted me and said, "We had a new person who came to church this morning to hear you sing. He came back tonight and gave his heart to the Lord."
Mm, that's what it's all
That's the
about.
most that's the most enriching thing that can happen to this old boy.
It's why you
When
sing.
when I get that kind of news
Yeah,
from one of our visits, then I thank God for 52 years.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Mm, that's great. That's great. How and people sometimes throw this word around, but how much of a genius was Harold Lane?
Well, we've had Harold O'Halloran was no doubt, no question about the fact. Of course, he was trained. He
Hmm.
had a degree in music, and he was a band director at Wayne County High School for I don't know how many years before he decided to make the move and become go into the business full time. But Harold had the capability, and this is absolutely the truth. I watched it happen. I took a song that I had written to Harold Lane and asked him to score it for me. 15 minutes later, he handed me back a four-part harmony, handwritten manuscript of the song. 15 minutes. I sat in bewilderment
Sure.
that the man could think and do it that quickly. But it was second nature for him. He and he arranged. I mean, he arranged practically everything the Spear family sang for years. 25 years, he was there.
When people, who true love the music like we do, and
Yeah.
study the history, Homeland Harmony, he did that for them. I mean,
He arranged for Homeland Harmony. He arranged for the Blackwoods. He arranged for the Statesmen. A lot of the arrangements that the Statesmen sang years ago that became so I, I idyllic in terms of what gospel
yeah.
music listeners thought was the best in the business were arrangements that Harold Lane had done. And it was just phenomenal the amount of work that he did and the people who called on him. I asked Carol one time we were at National Quartet Convention back when it was in Louisville, and I said, Harold, what are you doing these days? He'd already retired from the Spears. He said, well, right now I am orchestrating the Nazarene hymnal. I said, you are? He said, yeah, there are a lot of Nazarene churches who have small orchestras at their church, and I'm orchestrating the hymnal. I said, man, that sounds like a gargantuan job. He said, well, it's my retirement. So,
Well,
you know,
yeah,
uh,
yeah,
he evidently did well with it. And he had some songs that just absolutely just wore it out. He wrote Standing on a Solid Rock.
right.
He wrote a song called, um, oh, I can't, Wayfaring Stranger keeps me from thinking of it, but I can't remember the title of the tune. But it ended up being the title song for a television show called The Hitchhiker,
Yes,
which ran 4 or 5 years. And of
yes.
course, Harold did really well with that, and ended up being the financially being the biggest song I'm sure that he wrote, just because
Well,
of
he
the
did
TV royalties,
touring that city,
touring that city.
yeah, which
Yeah,
was huge for the boys from Bryson City. Um,
absolutely.
so, I
He
mean,
he just
he's
wore it out, and he wrote a song when I first came with the Harmony Boys. He wrote a song that was entitled "He Keeps on Cleansing Me." That was And when I saw that piece of music, I thought, "Good grief, I will never learn this. This is over my head."
yeah,
And it was, but it took a while. I could
yeah.
read music, but the harmonies that are in that song were nothing like this old boy from Flat Top had ever sung.
Well,
So I had some great mentors. Harold Patrick, who played piano for us at that time, was very very much like home or like Harold. He could sit down and write out an arrangement like that quickly, and we've had several of those kind of people in this group. We've had Harold Patrick, Harold Lane, Michael Bloomfield, who was absolutely phenomenal. We had who is now one of the most popular arrangers and players in the business today, a guy named James Rainey.
mhm,
Came out of this. So the first time he ever stepped on a quartet bus, we took him to Michigan after auditioning him the same night. He
yeah,
auditioned on Friday afternoon, and we left for Michigan right after we finished his audition.
yeah,
But we've had just some really phenomenal people. Greg Tingler has been in this group, and Greg has written 5 or 6 songs that have been top 10 tunes, even for Gold City, for the Lefevres,
he
for
wrote
Jimmy Swaggart.
he wrote "Moving Up," didn't he? That
Yeah,
you
he
all
did.
do.
Yeah,
Great song, great
yeah.
song.
And we've done that song probably for the last 5 or 6 years, or at least maybe more.
Yeah, yeah,
And but it's one of those tunes that you just can't. Once you get it in the program, it's hard to get out.
sure.
Um,
Well,
so
and
it's a good up tempo tune.
absolutely, and then
So
of
great.
course, I'm sorry.
Those you get guys like that in an organization and in a music group. I mean, the talent is just
Sure,
that talent is just amazing. It's so much fun and a privilege to have had the opportunity to work with those people. I'm God's blessed me. I mean, I've I've I have been I have had the opportunity to work with some of the best in the business. Some of the best.
well, what impact did Homer Fry have on Clacy Williams?
Well, Homer Fry is responsible for changing my life. Um, when I auditioned with the Harmony Boys, I understand that there were 2 other guys that auditioned, and I was not the unanimous choice. Um, from what my understanding was, Homer essentially came down to the bottom line. Homer just said, "No, that's who we're hiring," and so Homer is responsible for the last 50 years of my life, and the things that have happened, the things that have done as far as the music business is concerned. Um, and he lost his oldest daughter this past week. She
Yes,
had a
yes,
memorial service for her on Monday, and all of those wonderful memories just came flooding back um, as I drove down to her memorial service, and John Snodgrass and I both sang at the memorial. So it was a sad yet celebration type of meeting, because we know where she was headed to, and she had
right,
not been well for a while.
sure. Well,
Yeah.
I don't think the Guardians are such a just a they've exploded here over the past few years. I mean,
They have.
they are at the top of the Southern gospel world right now.
And
But
that's a bunch of guys right there who have been friends for years. I am so excited and so happy for those boys. I mean,
oh,
they've worked, every one of those boys have worked their entire lives to be where they are.
and
And
we had them got the worship with them last year at the Hall of Fame,
yeah,
and
yeah,
just the best.
they're a joy just to be around.
They are.
Oh yeah,
That's what I enjoy. People say, "Man, that must be a good time at the Hall of Fame." But what I enjoy is before that service ever starts.
yeah.
I mean,
Well, and Dean Hickman started that group, and Dean and I became friends when I practically the first day I started with the Harmony Boys. We've known each other and been friends for that many years.
yeah,
And there is no one in any business who's a classier, more gentlemanly individual than Dean Hickman. I just absolutely love the guy to death.
one hundred
And now,
percent.
uh, Scott Mullins is singing baritone with the group, and
Yeah,
Scott was with us for several years. Scott did a
you
couple of
know,
recordings with us.
we surprised Dean with announcing his induction back at NQC
Yeah,
last year. Well, it would have been 2 years ago when we announced it, and they had me. I worked it out with John Darren and the guys, and so they brought me up on the platform, and I said, "Let's look at this lineup here." And I started on the end, and of course it was Dean. I said, "West Virginian," then Scotty, West Virginian. Uh, John Darren, West Virginia. I said, Mark Hale back there, West Virginia. I said, and Pat has heard about West Virginia. Uh, so
how could you possibly claim to be from Ohio?
I'm just yeah. So, but what I was getting at with the Guardians was, of course, Dean Hickman from Clarksburg originally.
Yeah,
Uh, he's in our Hall of Fame, the SGMA West Virginia Hall of Fame. John Darren Rousey was in the first class.
he's
Um,
one of the charter members.
yes, yes, and but people may not realize the impact that Homer Fry had on the Guardians.
Yeah, yeah. Homer left us in 1988 after 30 some years. He started in 1954.
Yeah.
The group had been organized 2 years when Homer started. Um, but and of course, he was in the military when they started.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't around. So when he came home from service, he became part of the group, and he he left us in 1988, and Homer left, and Gray Johnson, who's probably one of the best bass singers that ever breathed a breath, he retired. He was going to retire, and we sang on a Easter Sunday morning at a church in Huntington, and he he got back on the bus, and he said, I'm not feeling real well. He said, I think tomorrow morning I'm gonna run down to the hospital and have him check me out. He went into the hospital on Monday morning, and he died on Friday.
Mm.
We had a congestive heart failure, and he never came out of the hospital.
Wow.
And 2 weeks later, his wife had cancer, and Homer announced to us 2 weeks later that he had to get off the road to take care of Eileen in her final months,
Sure.
which he did. And I said, Homer, please don't just leave. Take a leave of absence, and we'll not fill the position. We'll just find somebody to fill in.
Right.
And he just absolutely insisted that he needed to leave. Um, that's when Steve Black came on board. In fact, he even pointed out who he wanted to replace him. He chose his successor, and of course,
What a voice.
Steve
Woo.
Black's one of the most amazing singers
Mm.
that's ever walked. I mean, he's an amazing talent. He's kind of like
100,
Scott Brooks. Um,
100%.
Scott
Who
Brooks,
in the Hall of Fame as well. Scott
Yeah,
Brooks.
also a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, yeah,
Scott's just one of those people that I mean, he's just an amazing vocal. God's blessed him so much. But anyway, Homer left at that juncture, and as it worked out, Eileen passed away probably a year and a half or so after Homer left, and shortly thereafter, Dean kind of reorganized the group. The group Dean had been working with at that time was the Urig brothers out of Chillicothe, Ohio, and they one of the guys they had kind of decided that they were going to bail out, and so Dean came in and sang with them for a while and kind of got that group back on its feet again.
right,
And then they changed the name of the group to the Guardians, and so they sang as the Guardians for a long time before anybody ever knew who they were, essentially. But Homer went with that organization, and so did John Darren. John Darren Rousey was there in those early years too, as the Guardians. So both those guys played a major role in what the Guardians are today.
right,
They
right.
really had. John
Well,
Darren in arranging. John's an amazing arranger. In
yeah,
fact, he's produced the vocals on the last last two CDs we've done. We hired him to come in and be there as the producer for the
right.
vocal sessions.
And another part of the Guardians organization that is, uh, I call him the sound man's sound man, Mark Hale.
He's
Hmm.
Mark. Mark decided years ago that he's going to set up a little studio in Huntington, and he never. I'm confident that Mark had no idea that it would ever become what it did. Um, Mark made a great living for many years from that little studio, and it just all started because he was so interested, and he said on the front end he called it Harvest Gospel Studios.
Mm-hmm.
Did nothing but gospel music. Once upon a time, I went in there and we were talking about doing um, Almost Heaven, West Virginia
Mm-hmm.
on an album,
Yeah.
just as a salute to West
Right.
Virginia. And Mark said, guys, I really don't want to do that. He said, when I started this studio, I dedicated it to the Lord, and that we would just do gospel music. He said, I really can't, with good conscience, call that a gospel song. Um, and we did some patriotic things, which he was
Yeah.
okay with,
Yeah.
but he just didn't feel comfortable doing that. So we scratched it. That's how much we respected Mark Hale. We scratched the song and just didn't do it. Um, but 1988, we went to Mark Hale's to do the first recording that we ever did with him. Um, we had been using studios in Cincinnati and Nashville. We did some stuff at the Cathedral Tomorrow up in Akron, which was a great studio. But well, after we did that one with Mark in 1988, and by the way, Chuck Lawrence played the piano on that session. Chuck is going to be recognized
Yeah.
at the at the induction service.
Uh-huh.
When you talk about his contribution, it's amazing just how much that man has done for gospel music. In fact, he was a big asset to Mark Hale in setting that studio up to start with.
Absolutely.
I'm not sure
Absolutely.
Mark would have ever gotten it done without Chuck.
Chuck was he was a DJ there in Huntington,
Yeah,
wasn't he?
that's
Too.
right.
Yeah.
He was a DJ at WMM
Mm-hmm.
back
You
in
know,
those years.
it's just funny. Again, the connection. It's just
Like I
everything
said,
just
it's a small
connects the dots.
community,
Yeah.
and it's amazing how you hear people talk about competitiveness among groups.
Yeah.
How I'm going to outsing them or I'm going to outsell them at the table. You
Mm-hmm.
get you hear about that kind of stuff, but the reality is, I've never met anybody in this business that hasn't been willing to bend over backwards and give you their shirt if it would be helpful to you
Right.
and to help your ministry grow. That's just
Yeah.
how most people in this business are. and it's a pleasure to have that opportunity to deal with those kind of folks.
Well, we have been talking for over an hour, and it doesn't seem like it, does it?
No, it doesn't. That
It
doesn't.
doesn't. I mean, this is. I want to first of all thank you for being a part of this. I could think of no one that I'd rather have on this first show than you. So I'm grateful that you said yes, yes, I'll do it. And I was like, "Whoo, good."
Well, I'm
Uh,
delighted that you asked. Thanks so much. It's
well,
truly been my pleasure to do this.
well, I want to before we go, if you would tell us a little bit about what the Harmony Boys are up to this year, who's in the group, and how they can get a
Well,
hold of you.
well, unfortunately, Henry Rife has just left. Henry sang bass for us for the last couple of years, and my gracious, what a talent he is! He's
Yeah,
just he's a on top of being just a class act guy. He's an amazing talent as well,
yeah,
and it hurts me uh, to even mention the fact that he is not going to be traveling with us because of I will miss him personally,
yeah.
as well as miss his voice when we sing. Um, we will and are trying to locate someone to fill up that hole. We're looking for a bass singer. So I don't know how low can you go, Chris? Just how.
Well, it's sinus infection. I mean, it's doable.
Got some pretty good notes when you get
Yeah,
infected.
oh yeah, it's impressive, but then it goes away. So
so so we lost Henry, and if someone's listening that's a decent bass singer, give us a call. We'd be glad to listen to you. Then we've got Scott Adams, who has the solo line on that. I talked to someone about you today.
yes,
Scott interprets that song about as well as it can be sung, and I'm he's been with me now for about I think about 6 or 7 years. I don't remember exactly. He came probably I might be closer to 10. He came shortly after Scott Mullins left, and so it must have been around. It must have been around 2015 or 14 or 15 when Scott left. So
well,
he's been with us close to 10 years
yeah,
almost,
yeah,
pushing 10. Um, Scott Brooks, of course, is Scott is kind of our concrete guy. I mean, he's as stable as a rock and sings like an angel. I have been so blessed to have had the opportunity to have Scott in our organization, and he loves the Lord. He's a deacon in his church, and so that speaks to where he comes from to start
well,
with,
I've
and
told him, I said publicly, I'll never ever say anything bad about you, Scott, and mainly because he carries my life insurance policy, and so that
well, you got to
doesn't
be
hurt.
you got to be careful.
That's it. That's it. Yeah, Andrea loves him. Yeah, so,
Oh yeah, well she would.
yeah, yeah.
She's he's her future.
That's right. That's right.
Oh,
Well,
well,
how
he does a great job, and
he
and
does,
and
he does.
he's in the last year or two he's picked up the responsibility for introducing a few songs, and boy, I love that because it gives me a break, and
Yeah,
I'm tickled to death that he's doing some of that, and he does such a good job with it. He really does.
I agree. How
Although
can go ahead?
Scott has the ability to talk a lot too. If you'll remember from the induction service last year.
Yeah, I had if you remember, I had some notes there, and I just went like that. Get that. No, here's the thing about the induction ceremony, and you have to try to have some kind of plan because if you don't, then it's going to be 5 hours.
Yeah, yeah,
Because it's such a those people watching and listening that have never been. It's such a special evening where, as you said earlier, you're reliving memories, and it's
yes,
all about the inductees. I have been blessed to be able to do these videos, these induction videos, and I will sit here And I always say to myself, if I was being inducted and I'm watching that video, how would I feel about that? Because
Yeah,
I want
it's
whoever is honored to walk away from there knowing you're loved and to feel like $1,000,000. You know,
that's
I
a
hope
that's
when
that's a
you
great
walked
goal.
out, yeah, I hope when you walked out, you had a good feeling about it.
Oh, I certainly did. It was one of the greatest honors of my life, and I've had some wonderful privileges in this life, but that's the top of my heap.
Well, well deserved. How can everybody get a hold of you? What's your website there, Clacy?
Well, anybody who goes into Google and types in Gospel Harmony Boys is going to find us. I
Okay.
mean, we will pop right up, and all you got to do is click on that, and it'll take you to our webpage.
Okay.
Yeah, our
Is that
schedule is there. The schedule is always up to date.
is that
Uh,
gospelharmonyboys.com?
.org.
.org. Okay.
.org.
Okay.
.com will get us too, but
Okay.
we usually
Well,
advertise the .org.
well, the reason I say that is I had a banner all built that I was going to show across the screen, but I
Uh huh.
had .com and not .org because
Both
uh,
work.
will that work?
Yeah, both of them
Look at there.
works.
Look at that.
Shock, shock.
Woo. Just
Well, you are so technically oriented. I am
well,
impressed.
something like that. Something
I'm
like that. I'm
impressed.
yeah. I'm stunned it showed up. I'll be honest with you. Well, Clacy, it has been and always is an honor and just a lot of fun when we get together and talk. And I told you a few years ago, I said, it's a shame we drive 4.5 hours to NQC and talk.
That's right.
So we've done better. We've done better to change that a little bit. And
Well,
but
I am grateful that you invited me to be part of your evening, and thank you so much for doing so. It has been nothing but a true joy and a delight for me to have the
well,
opportunity to spend this hour and a half, whatever it's been,
yeah,
with you and whoever tunes in. We'll be just it's exciting to have you folks visiting with us
that's right.
and eavesdropping on our conversation. We're
That's
tickled to
right.
have you.
That's right. And like I said, if you didn't enjoy tonight, then call Scott Brooks. I don't know what else to say.
Give him his phone number. Put it up on
That's
the screen.
yeah, I will. Again, it's that policy that kind of scares me. Uh, but Clacy, my friend, best of luck to you. We'll see you down the road here soon.
God bless you, Chris, and keep the wheels turning and keep our folks over on Southern Blend going well. And we're tickled to have been number 3 on your charts, and it's been a joy to watch that song and you've had a big and important role in the success of that tune, and I thank you for that too.
Well, buddy, anytime, anytime. Clacy Williams, a legend. We'll talk to you soon, Clacy.
Later, pal.
All right, buddy. All right, folks. Well, I hope you've enjoyed what we've presented tonight here on the first edition of the Chris Akers Show. We're going to try to do this quite often, but really, there was no other person to have on here for the first show. So we're very thankful for Clacy Williams of the Gospel Harmony Boys for being with us. That's going to do it for this edition of the Chris Akers Show. Again, please log on to southernblendradio.com and download that Live 365 app and check out Southern Blend Radio. But most of all, if you take nothing away from tonight's show, just always remember Jesus loves you.